My wife and I often serve as kind of second chair to my wife's capital campaigns that she does for churches. And she was called many years ago to do a capital campaign for a church in Morristown, New Jersey, which is nearby. It's a very, very classy neighborhood. Bill Bennington lives there. It really is a very classy neighborhood, by the way. And anyhow, we were chosen to, she was chosen to do this, one of the first capital campaigns she did. And she was thinking this will be kind of a slam dunk because there are a lot of well-to-do people that live in that area. And this was when we had young kids, so it's quite a time ago since my eldest is now 40. But in any case, when you have young kids, and apparently this still happens. I was talking to the Vietnamese gentleman who lives next door to me, and he was telling me the same story. But when you have young kids, what you do is you buy a van. It's kind of like you have to have a van or a big SUV, something that you can stick all the kids in. And so we, in those days, didn't have SUVs, and we bought vans. And so we went through this process every few years where we would go out to replace the van. You know, the payments were up and starting to show its age, and we would go out to get another one. And we went through this thing where I would read consumer reports, which I never read. I would read consumer reports and determine who had the best van. And then we would take a day off from work and we would do what was called just looking. And just looking is where you go to these places and you try not to get attacked by these salespeople. And you'd look at what was out there and you kind of get down to the nitty-gritties of what kind of a situation you want. And we always wound up, it seemed, at this one place, which is no longer even around, a Chrysler Plymouth dealership that had the van that we wanted, it seemed. And we were still in the just looking mode at the end of the day, and we would park our old van on the lot, and I don't think my foot actually hit the tarmac there on the, and when this guy would pop out of this little house and go, "Jim, Lynn, how you been?" Now, I hadn't seen this guy for, 52 payments. That's the way I kind of looked at these things. That's the last time I saw this guy was 52 payments ago. And this guy would just pop out of this little box. He remembered our names. I didn't remember his name. He remembered our names, and he'd say, "Oh, Kathleen, you've gotten so big." So he remembered the kids' names, for gosh sakes. And we'd go through this whole thing, and just want to say that it was this many-hour process that suddenly happened to me, which I had no control over, at which time I never remember ever saying the word yes at any time in this process, and yet I drove home that night with another van and a new payment book. So we had just gone through this process. We had our newest van at that time, and I'm looking through the list of potential solicitors that she's going to use at this church in Morristown, and lo and behold, if our car salesperson is not on the list. And what we used to do in those days is we would go out on the first round of solicitations and accompany one of the solicitors as an illustration. Now, we would say nothing. But when we would come back to the meeting that we would have for all the solicitors, we'd say, "I went out with Harry here today, and I'll tell you what a great job Harry did. Let me tell you what he did right." To kind of emphasize to everybody that this is something you can do too. So I went out with my friend, the guy that sold us all these vans, figuring this was a slam dunk. And we go to this house in Morristown, and this house, you had to see it to believe it. They had statuary. I don't mean statues, I mean statuary. The house was big enough for that, And we're sitting in the living room, and he's going through the materials for the campaign, and he's going, and as you can see, by building the addition to the church here, we will have better parking, and the people are going, "Absolutely, oh, that's wonderful." And I'm thinking, we got it. This is going great. And he goes on and on and on, and we finally get to the point where you have to make the ask. And in the capital campaign, you show a gift range that's appropriate, and you say, "Well, John and Mary, I'm hoping that we could count on you for a gift in this range. Would that be comfortable for you?" And then you shut up. So we get to this point. Now he's done everything right. These people love the church. They love the project. They're really into it. We get around to this point where he just has to point to that line and says that word, and all of a sudden, instead of the successful car salesman, I got the Swedish chef sitting in front of me. Remember him from the Muppets? So he points to the thing and he goes, and I look over at the guy and it's like, what was that? I don't say that, but I mean, that's what I'm thinking. And it's like, he's just completely mumbling and papers are flying all over, and it's like, we lost this whole thing, and they're even confused. Like, I got a feeling they got the checkbook ready to roll, and this guy's... So anyhow, it kind of rolls around again, which professional salespeople have told me sometimes happens. So it kind of rolls around again till we're back to the ask again. And we get back to the ask, and sure enough, it's the point where he's got the little envelope out where they can make their choice, and he goes, as you can see on the envelope, and we just kind of say, well, thanks a lot for your time, and we wander out, and we're in the driveway standing between two Lexi. And I'm just furious, quite frankly. I'm not supposed to be, but it's my wife's campaign, what the heck, because she couldn't fire me. So I'm furious, and I'm ready to take his payment book and put it who knows where, But I said to him, what happened? I said, I can't understand it. I said, you were so good. These people love the project. They love the church. And we get to the ask, and it just disappeared. And he said, oh, I do that for a living. I couldn't do it for the church. I said, what? What do you mean? He said, well, I do it for a living. It just doesn't seem right to do it for the church. And I realized that this attitude is all throughout the nonprofit world. It's like if we took the skills, the God-given skills, I think car salesmen, if they're any good, are remarkable people that we can learn from. I really do. But they took the God-given skills that these people have, and for some reason they believe if they use these skills in the nonprofit world, in the ministries that they're involved in, that it's wrong. And I thought maybe that was an isolated situation. I've run into it many, many other times. People will say to me, before I got into ministry, I used to sell life insurance. I said, wow, you must be a great asker because that's a tough gig. Well, I don't do too good. Did you make a living selling life insurance? Yeah, I did. Did a good living. How come you can't use it today for something more important? How come you can't now take those skills that you were taught, you learned, that God gave you, and use them today? And we see this all the time. If you believe in your organization, if you believe in your ministry, if you believe in its work, all of those skills that the world teaches people to make a living can be put to use here for a better and greater purpose. So all of those skills are applicable.